Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Crosswalk, where bold ideas meet real talk and curiosity fuels every conversation. We are your hosts, Tanim and Farabi, here to dive deep, challenge norms, and bring you stories that spark something new.
So most Bangladeshi students who dream of studying abroad usually wait for a master's or PhD. But our today's guest is different. She came here to do a bachelor's. Today we'll talk about why she made that choice, whether studying abroad for undergraduate is really worth it, the financial and cultural challenges faced, and some controversial realities that people don't talk about. Welcome to Crosswalk, Pooh. If you want to introduce briefly to our audience.
Hi everyone, my name is Dola. I'm from Dhaka. I currently live in Virginia. I work as a geotechnical engineer. I'm a civil engineer. That's about it. And I think today we're going to talk about my path to coming here from Dhaka. So hopefully it's going to be helpful to everybody.
Thank you so much, Apu. So, growing up in Bangladesh, are you always that person that who is always like likes to do something different, or is that something that came from your family to really drive into this unusual path of doing bachelors in US?
It wasn't really like it was a push from the family, obviously. Like both my parents, they always encouraged like, pursuing degrees or like when it came to like studying more. But coming here for a bachelor's, it was definitely like it was more their choice than it was mine. Which was, I think, a big deal. Like where my friends had to kind of convince their parents to let them apply. It was my parents telling me like you should apply. And then if it comes out that we can afford it, then why not? And they always had this idea that, if you want to do a master's or, go for graduate studies, you're always going to go outside Bangladesh. So
Mhm.
if you go younger, my dad personally, he thought like going younger makes it easier for you to adjust. So I think the thought kind of came from there. And then, it was always like if you have enough, like if you have good scores and it comes out like, yeah, you found a school that works and we can afford it, then we'll support it. So it was mainly, I think, both my parents who kind of pushed me to do it. It wasn't so much my choice at the time, but yeah.
Okay. So in Bangladesh, parents usually prefer these safe options like going to universities like BUET, DU, or
hmm
IBA, or other universities that are very much well known in Bangladesh. Why do you think your family pushed for the opposite? How are they different in their thinking from the other families in Bangladesh?
It's not so much that I think they're so different in their thinking. They also had that protective mind too. Like when I came here, I came to Texas where my mom's sister lives there. So they did want me to be around family. So the few options that they had on top of their list was wherever we had relatives. So, whatever happens, you have family around. Because up until that point, I lived at home with my parents. I never like really did anything on my own. There was that, but I think both my parents always like they like for girls to be independent and they like for girls to be educated. So they really like they always had this idea that okay, you're gonna study. It's not like oh, you get a bachelor's and you're done. Like you've got to do something on your own. So that has always been there. I don't know if that's what made them say like okay, go pursue something outside of Bangladesh. Um, but it just growing up it was just always the idea that they gave me like if you want to do it, if you can do it, like we will support it. So yeah.
Yeah, so Apu, as you mentioned that and both your parents wanted to pursue an undergrad program outside of Bangladesh. So did anyone criticize your parents for sending you abroad so early, saying things like why waste so much money when she could pursue a degree in Bangladesh?
um it wasn't necessarily criticism, but there were opinions, obviously, even in the family or like within friends
Yeah.
that, or like my friends' parents, because they had the idea that yeah, let them do a bachelor's here, then they'll be a little more grown up, then they can go get a master's or stuff like that. Like you're more grown up, you're more responsible for yourself, and at 18 you're too young to be living by yourself. So that thought, those opinions were always there. I don't think that my parents necessarily gave it so much importance in the sense that like they would be more willing to spend on my degree than giving me a lavish wedding. So they had that mindset. I think I got lucky in that sense. So it wasn't that there were not criticism, it was there, but it just didn't really seem that important to my parents. And because it wasn't important to them, it never really it didn't make a difference to me because they didn't really give it
Yeah.
so much importance.
So, if it wasn't from your family, um, do you think you would have taken this decision on your own?
I may have tried in the sense that because all my friends were applying at the time. There were agencies that help you apply to schools in Canada, and I know that we had an agency come into our school and give us a whole presentation, which was very fascinating. So I probably would have tried it, but I think if there was resistance from my parents, I may have not pushed it so much because I don't think I would have pushed it so much. And I know it's not so easy to convince your parents if they're so against it also. So I may have given up and just stayed in Bangladesh. Um, but I think it was their support that kind of pushed it through.
So you did mention you got some exposure from one of the agencies who came in your um, college, but
Mhm.
so how did you prepare yourself for applying for those undergrad programs, and how long did it take?
So I went to Mastermind school in Uttara, which is an English school. So I did A level and O level. Um, so I was thinking about applying to Australia, Canada, and America when I first decided that okay, I'm gonna send in my applications. So if I had applied to Australia and Canada, which I actually didn't end up applying there, I wouldn't have to do so much as much as you would have to do if you had to apply to an American university, your A-level scores, and if you just have to do like an English proficiency test, so you can do the TOEFL, you can do the IELTS, whichever is easier for you, and you should be fine. So for Canada, I didn't really have to do much because I thought, okay, these schools in Canada and Australia, I probably already have what I need to send in. But for the US, you need to do a little more. So it's not very different for an international student as it is for a local student here who does undergrad. So you would have to do like 12 years of schooling. So you have to have a school completion certificate, which most people in Bangladesh have. And if you didn't go to school for all those years, then I think you can take the GED exam. So that gives you like equivalency for completion of school. So I had the school completion done, and then I had to take the SAT exam. The SAT, I believe I prepared for maybe 3 to 5 months. Um, you can always prepare more. Um, I did go to a coaching center in Bonani. It was called Princeton at the time. I don't know if it's still around. So I used to take classes there. It was mostly math and English. And I prepped with them. They helped me register for the test and everything. And I took the test. And I took it only once. You can take it multiple times as well. And then I took the TOEFL for the English proficiency. And for the TOEFL, I didn't really spend so much time preparing, maybe 1 or 2 weeks. For both the SAT and the TOEFL, I don't think you need to go to a center. Like when I think about it now, I feel like you're completely capable of doing the preparation at home by yourself. There's enough resources on the internet, or if you go to a bookstore in Bangladesh and you tell them, I need to take the SAT, they'll know which book you need to have. So all that you can do on your own. If you put enough time to it, you can. At the time, I was not so aware of, finding resources on the internet or like, helping myself prep. Or I don't think 10 years ago there were as many resources available as well. So I went to a center, and like I think 3 to 5 months, somewhere between 3 to 5 months, yeah. And then I took the exams.
Okay. And I know you mentioned that your relatives were in Texas. Other than that, what were the selection criteria for your universities that were you applying to, and how many applications did you do, and like how the success rate looked like? Uh,
I didn't do that many applications. It's just that my timing was a little off. So I took my SAT in February, and I wanted to go to school in the fall of the same year. So most schools like close applications by March or April. So I barely had like a month or two to apply. So not all schools even had like a deadline available at the time. So I think I ended up applying to a couple of schools in Texas and one in Georgia. Um, that was the selection criteria. One was that if I had relatives around, that's good. Another was like there are some schools that have it mandated that you have to stay in the dorm for the first year, which is something my parents didn't really want me to do. So if that criteria was there, they said like let's not do that because they were not very open to that. Um, so that was just the two things. Not that I also like scholarships and financial aid. That was also something to look for. Like affordability was a big factor as well. But mostly like, with my SAT score, which school will accept me? Did I have a deadline at the time? And then there was affordability.
So, as you applied in Georgia and Texas, so any of these universities had any interviews during the admission process, or how was the
Mm.
admission process there for both of universities?
They're fairly like it takes time, but it's fairly like simple. Everything that they want, it's usually listed on the website and you send in your package, and then you'll probably get an email from them that gives you like a portal where you can track like so there's a list of things that they need from you, and okay, we received this from her, and maybe this is still missing. So you can track that, and it's fairly straightforward. You'll get to know like through email, and then they mail over an I-20 for you. Um, there weren't any interviews. The only thing I would mention is some schools do require that you write an essay for the programs. And then sometimes I applied to engineering, so there was also this thing that I could specify like my top choices. And I don't really 100% know like how they evaluate that, like which program you get, but I did get the program that I had specified on top of my list. I came here to do electrical engineering, but I didn't really like it after the first semester, and then civil happened. But yeah.
So, as you mentioned, there was no interview. So, the selection criteria solely based on the SAT scores, or did you have to submit any extracurricular activities or something like that?
So I believe in the application package, there's your school transcript. So if you did an HSC, you would send in your certificates. If we did L level, you'll have like scores, you would send those in. So there's that. I think the most important thing that they look at is whether you did complete school for 12 years or not. I believe, I forget if it's 10 or 12 years, but you have to have like a school completion certificate. So that's one of the main criteria that you have to meet. SAT scores, I believe, is important in determining whether or not you get a scholarship. So there's two SATs. One you have to take, the other is optional, and the optional one is on a specific subject. So, for example, if you wanted to come here and study chemistry, and you did an advanced SAT on a chemistry, so that score might help them give you a scholarship that okay, this person has done like an advanced SAT on this subject, and that's what they want to major in, and they're really good. So that might help with the scholarship as well. So I think schools will have a minimum SAT score after which they'll admit you to the program, but the higher your score, the better your chances are to get a scholarship.
So, once you got your I-20 and everything, when did you apply for the visa, and how was the visa interview?
I think the process was it was fairly fast, like I told you before, because I was trying to come here for August of 2015, and I was applying in March, which is not something I recommend you do. Like, do it ahead of time. So I didn't have a whole lot of time. I applied for the visa interview as soon as I got my I-20. All that was done, and I actually had my interview on it was student visa day at the embassy that day. So everybody was in a very good mood. A lot of people got their visas that day. I luckily didn't really have that many questions. I went very prepared because the center that I used to do my SAT classes at, Princeton, they also had people who would kind of help guide you for your interview, because like a lot of the students are young.
Yeah.
Visa interviews are scary. So they'll tell you, like, even if you want to do a mock interview, they'll do a mock interview with you. They'll ask you questions and you answer them. So they kind of gave me an idea. They might ask you for financial documents. They might ask you like why you chose the school, all sorts of things. I kind of went prepared. He didn't really ask me any question as far as I remember. I do remember that he asked me why Texas. And I think I said something along the lines of that the weather is similar to Bangladesh or whatever that I had practiced before going in. But so my interview luckily was fairly simple. But I did go with like they tell you go in with your bank statements that you can afford to pay your tuition, whatever's listed on your I-20. So I did go in with all the documents that they can ask me for. But they luckily didn't ask me for anything.
I remember like I had a file of like maybe hundreds of pages
Yeah.
there going out there, and they didn't ask for any of the paper.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's the scary part.
Yeah.
So many people in Bangladesh has a very glossy idea of how life in US is. If you are coming to a master's or PhD, like you are pretty much very mature because you spend a good amount of time in undergrad university with in uncertain places. But as an undergrad student, when you came to US, what was the first reality check for you? Like, did something shock you culturally or anything?
So one of the reasons my dad wanted me to come here young was because he thought if you're young, the culture shock is less and you can adapt easily, which was really not the case. I mean, when I went to school, the culture shock was huge. Even though, like, at home in Bangladesh, or with my friends, I always spoke in English, but here people had an accent. And it's not that I didn't understand what they were saying, but it still took me some time, or
Right.
just simple things as like looking up places, walking everywhere on campus. It was not easy, and especially because you're not used to all that in Bangladesh, just going to like high school, right? Because you go to
Right.
school, you come back, you go to coaching, you come back. You don't walk yourself to the bookstore, or like how expensive textbooks are. I was trying to buy a calculus book, and I remember it was $200, and I'm already counting my money, right? And then I'm like, how am I supposed to buy these books because they don't sell duplicates like they do in Nilkhet in Bangladesh, right?
Right.
But over time, you learn the ways. Like I found a website where you could actually buy duplicate books. Um, so there are things that you learn with time. The culture shock, it was pretty huge. The first semester, like starting from how people were speaking, or I remember I took calculus my first semester, and it's just the way the professor would teach in class. Like, in Bangladesh, we say 2/4. Here, they say 2/4. Even simple things like that, or I'm going to say 2 into 3. They're going to be like 2 times 3. Just little things like that. We don't think about that as much. Like, oh, you don't think like that's going to be a problem. Or like the unit system, that everything is in feet. Like after all these years, like now I no longer refer to things in meters. But back then I did. Um, so the culture shock was pretty big. No matter how young I was, it didn't really matter. It was everywhere.
Great. So did you ever feel like maybe I could have a more easier life back in Bangladesh if I
Many
did?
times. I felt that many times because I came here, like I said, I finished A-levels in June of 2015 and I came here in August. The norm in Bangladesh, I think, is you take some time, you do admission tests, and you go to university after a while. So most of my friends who stayed in Bangladesh, they went to university after a while. And then they went to university, they made friends very easily. It was hard for me to find another Bangladeshi person in class, right? And I never had a Bangladeshi classmate during undergrad. So it made me sad that they made friends, or they were hanging out after university. They were going here and there. They had a whole social life from the beginning, which I didn't, because I had to make new friends. I had to get into a whole new culture. So many times I did feel like that I probably should have stayed back. My life would have been easier. But I think I graduated in 4 years, which a lot of people in Bangladesh, like, for whatever reason, we don't graduate in 4 years, right? Even here you don't, but if you push hard enough, I think you can. Um, at that point, I felt happy that, maybe I made the right decision, but I regretted it many times throughout the 4 years that I probably should have stayed back. My life would have been easier. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely making friends would have been easier. Like I still have hard time like having conversation with people. Like I don't get all the references. Like
Yeah.
how do I continue the conversation? So yeah.
Yeah, that's the hard part. So, how did you deal with the like cultural shock, being alone, managing your own life, and starting in a new system, in a new continent?
I think it was more one day at a time. It wasn't a very, like I said, my first semester was especially harder because I came in to do electrical engineering and I didn't realize how much I would not like that class. And I had one intro to electrical lab and I really didn't enjoy it at all, where I had to make circuits and stuff like that. And especially with electrical, I think I had a lab full of boys. There, I was the only girl in that class and I just didn't like it. So my first semester was specifically harder because of that, because I wasn't even enjoying school as much. But I think it was one day at a time. Eventually, I made friends. I started noticing that, here what happens is like you don't like this. You don't go to this every class with the same number of people or the same bunch of people, right? Because everybody's from a different major. The first 2 years, you're just taking basic
Yeah.
classes. But I found a couple of people with whom I had like maybe more than one class in common. So I started making friends there. I made those connections that helped. My aunt was very close to me, so I got home cooked meals and everything. So that part was easier. Like when I left the campus and I went back home, at least I felt like I was in Bangladesh because I had people would talk to me in Bangla. It was all nice. But eventually, though, I started meeting more Bangladeshis around, mostly grad students. And I think those connections really helped because I used to work in a lab as an undergrad,
Yeah.
where there were lots of people from Bangladesh. And that really helped me. And then over time, I started noticing more and more people, and not just Bangladeshis, even like Sri Lankans or Indians and South Asians. I also had American friends, but it just so happened somehow I hung out with South Asians a lot more. Um, so yeah, it was definitely like I think one day at a time. The first couple of semesters were definitely more hard, like more difficult than the rest, but it got easier with time.
A lot of people say that the US undergrad system is more about like exploring rather than memorizing. So, what's the biggest difference you noticed compared to our education system here in US?
So I don't know a whole lot about undergrad in Bangladesh, but just like the teaching system.
Mhm.
I think here, at least when I was in school in Bangladesh, like they gave a lot of importance to one exam, right? It was one midterm, one final, and you were done, and that was your grade. But here we were doing homeworks every day. Like I was not doing homework in class 10 in school, but here in undergrad, I was doing homework every day, right? Or for every class, I had some assignment to do. There are projects that you need to do. There's a couple of midterms that you need to take. So I think that was a thing that you can screw up one exam, but your grade doesn't depend on that. There was that. There was this one thing that you could ask a teacher any question you wanted. There was no like, oh, I can't ask him a question. He looks like a senior teacher, or like my question may be dumb, so maybe I shouldn't ask this question. That hesitation was not there. If the teacher was doing something on the board and my friend thought that he did it wrong, there was no hesitation for her to tell him that, Professor, you did that wrong. And even if she did say that, like there wouldn't be any pushback from him that, oh, like, she being a student cannot speak to me like that. All that stuff was not there. So that was a big difference. Other than that, during engineering, something that I really liked here was for every advanced class, they would bring in somebody who works in the industry, and they will come in and they'll talk to you about like the relevance of what you're learning. Like, okay, here's what you're learning, and this is what we're doing in the industry with the same thing. Which I really liked. It just helped you see like, you're not learning this for no reason. Um, those were some of some things that I can think on top of my head that were different. Um, I don't necessarily want to say that the education system or the undergrad was easier here compared to undergrad in Bangladesh, but I think like the practice is very different. Everybody's open to questions. You can ask questions, and the professors want you to do well. They won't give you a difficult exam because they don't want you to score an A. Like they want you to do well. So you don't get like, because I've heard stories where my friends have told me like the class was all good, but the exam was super difficult because that professor was known to give you difficult exams. So stuff like that I didn't really face over here.
So the obsession of Bangladeshi people with the universities like BUET or any other popular universities, do you think this can limit the potential of many students, or do you think people in Bangladesh over romanticize like coming to abroad for higher studies?
I think I think BUET has a very good education program, right? Or like Dhaka University has a really good program as well. So I think if you want to do your bachelor's there, it's great. But I was just thinking that, if maybe let's say you didn't get into a public university for whatever reason, and you're choosing to get a private education in Bangladesh, in that scenario, you would be spending money, right? So maybe if you compare the cost, and if you end up getting a good scholarship, maybe you'll be spending just the same or maybe a little more in coming abroad and getting an undergrad here. So I don't necessarily think that you would be limiting yourself, but I think in Bangladesh, what happens is that we don't explore options.
Yeah.
Just so we think that, this is expensive or this is not gonna work because most people don't do it. But like what I'm trying to say is explore it. If it doesn't work for you, it doesn't work for you. And you always can stay at home and go to a university there. But if it might just work out, right? So yeah.
I think recently a lot of people are getting like scholarship in their undergrad programs in USA. So it's kind of like breaking the norms, and they're trying to apply for the undergrad and also like getting the scholarship as well. So that's really good for those students.
Yeah, also I wanted to add that sometimes, like something that as incoming students, you
Mhm.
don't have access to a lot of scholarships. That
Yeah.
once you're a student here, you have all these private scholarships that you can apply to from your university. I applied to a bunch of private scholarships like every year or every semester, because I knew that not a lot of people were applying to those. So my chances of getting those were higher. And it's not like if you get one, the university will not give you a second one, so your scholarships add up, so that also helps. So when we look at it from Bangladesh, it looks like it's a lot, but I think once you're here you can figure out that there are ways you can get a job on campus. I worked as a tutor for a while. I worked as a research assistant for almost 2 years during my undergrad, out of 4. So there are ways if you really want to make it work. So yeah.
Uh, okay. So can you talk a little bit more about, I guess, how you manage the finances throughout the whole undergrad journey, I guess?
So I went to the University of Texas, which is a state school. So one of the things that at the time they used to do, which I believe they no longer do, but other schools might do it still. So if you got a scholarship of any amount, even if it was like a $1,000 scholarship, they would let you pay in-state tuition. So your tuition automatically becomes half, right? So instead of say $10,000, I automatically had to pay $5,000 in the beginning. And on top of that, if I got a $1,000 scholarship, they would give me that money. I would use that to pay my tuition. And afterwards, what I figured out that you could apply to private scholarships, and like I said, they add up. So I remember one of the semesters, I ended up getting three private scholarships. One was $500, one was 1,000, the other was 1,500. So when they all added up, I had tuition of like $5,000. I ended up paying only 1,000 out of pocket, maybe. So that happened throughout my undergrad. That my parents gave me financial support, but with the scholarship money, I think I didn't need as much money from them as I expected I would need. So coming in, we did the math that okay, for your 4 years, we're probably going to have to give you this much money, but it was a lot less because I didn't know about all these private scholarships that you could get. So there was that, and then I took a tutoring job at the university. So usually those jobs are like if you have financial aid or if you can prove to them that I have a financial need, they're going to give you more preference in giving you the job because those jobs are limited. So I got a tutoring job that paid really well hourly, and I used to tutor students from the courses that I had already taken. So it was like material that you had learned and you were just tutoring somebody. It could even be your classmate, but just be from like a different section, so you'd be in the same course, like you tutor them as well. I did that for a little while. That gave me good, but that didn't give me enough money that I could pay my tuition with it. But that gave me enough pocket money for like, transport or whatever else that I needed. And then I think in the second or beginning of third year, I started working as an undergraduate research assistant in a lab. That had really good hourly pay as well, and it was a lot more hours because they needed more help. And my tutoring job, because there were so many tutors, I didn't always get a student, or it wasn't always. It was also on my schedule. But with the research job, I had many hours, and I used to work all throughout summer because I was not taking any classes during summer. So that also helped a lot. And I think with my research job, I made enough money one summer to be able to even pay my tuition with my money. So on top of scholarship, of course, otherwise I couldn't have. So yeah, with the normal jobs that you get on campus, I think it is enough to give you some help with your living assistance or your everyday. It might not be enough that you can pay your tuition with it, but if you get like, an RA, or I think now you can even get graders jobs and stuff like that, that really pay well enough that you can pay a little bit of your tuition with it as well.
Yeah, like there are a lot of opportunities here, but I think anyone who is planning to pursue a undergrad or any kind of program self-financed in US, so for them it would be better if they have a backup financing options because uh, maybe the scholarship wouldn't be there when they are pursuing, or maybe that doesn't go well with them.
Mm-hmm.
So they should have a backup options as well, I would say. Uh, so if you compare the cost of a bachelor's in the private colleges in Bangladesh versus the US, do you think the return on investment is truly worth it, or?
Now if you're thinking about it, like whether this undergrad helped me get a job,
Mhm.
I don't think so because I don't think like you guys got masters here and we probably work the same type of jobs, right? So in an interview, if you were a candidate and I was a candidate, I don't think anybody would think that, oh, she's a better candidate because she has an undergrad from here. At least in the many interviews that I have done, I have never seen that attitude, or like nobody ever picked up on that on the resume. The only thing I think they ever picked up was, oh, you have a PhD. It was never that, oh, you have an undergrad from the US. No, that has never been the case. So I don't think that it necessarily gives you an upper hand in pursuing a job or having a career here. I think the only benefit that it gave me was that I spent more time here than somebody who just came here to do a master's. So I may have been a little more familiar with the culture, or I may have been a little more familiar with everything here, as opposed to somebody who came to do a master's. Um, so if you're thinking of the return on the investment, in the sense whether it helps you get the job, I don't think that, because if you were to get a master's here and you did an undergrad in Bangladesh, in my opinion and in my experience, I think it's the same thing. You would be working the same job, and it's not like you're gonna get paid anymore, or they'll think you're a better candidate just because you have a bachelor's from here.
But then after your bachelor's, you would have been able to get into a job, right?
Yeah,
Because
that is true. So you could just, you could work for a couple of years, do a master's, and then go back to work again. So that option would be available to you. That's not something that I pursued. Sometimes in retrospect, I think I should have done that. But yeah, that option is there.
What would you say to someone like who says, why spend a crore or like a lot of money on a US bachelor's when you can do the same in Bangladesh with like a minimal amount of money?
Well, firstly, I don't think you're gonna end up spending a crore. Um, so that is there. But I don't think I'm necessarily like trying to convince somebody to come pursue a bachelor's here, because ultimately it's about what you want to do, right? With getting a degree in the US, you also get to have the choice of making a life here, right? So if you want to live here and go through the whole process of living by yourself, being an immigrant, making your life from scratch, um, then sure, go for it. But it's not necessarily going to be easy, neither is it going to be cheap, right? So I don't think I would necessarily try to convince anybody who doesn't want to do it, because I don't think I'm gonna have like a big argument there. But I think you need to like it's about if somebody wants to do it and thinks that they can't do it, I would say that I think it's more possible than we think it is. Because when we look at it from Bangladesh, everything seems expensive. When you're applying to so many universities, every university has an application fee. There's a credit card charge, right? And I remember when I was applying and I kept thinking like, oh, my charges are just adding up. Like everything is more expensive than it seemed like, and my parents are wasting money. What if I don't get in, right? On the other hand, my friends were not wasting all that money. So it looks like it's a lot, but I think once you're here and you kind of accommodate yourself to the situation here, you'll realize like there are more ways and it's not as bad as it seemed.
so what do you think is the biggest barrier? Is that the financial planning or the mindset that, or the fear of the risk that how would I end up in a new culture in such a young age?
I think they're all big drawbacks, right? Because I'm pretty sure like all those are probably the main reasons why somebody will not come here.
Right.
Um, I think um, financial constraints would be the biggest, in the sense that you're taking money from your parents. I'm pretty sure at that point, and you don't want them to like waste so much money on you, right? But I think the finances can be figured out, or so it also depends on whether in Bangladesh you were gonna go to a public university or a private university, right? If you were gonna go to a public university in Bangladesh, then I guess there is no like conversation anymore, right? Because like there's just no comparison really. But if you're gonna go to a private university where you're gonna spend a bunch of money, then I think maybe you could spend similar or maybe a little more and then get an education from here, which would allow you to get a job here early. If you wanted to get a job, you could get a master's, you could get a PhD, you could do whatever. And if you eventually did want to live here or make a life abroad. So I think all those three are big drawbacks, but I think financial drawback is the biggest. But I think that's the one that um, you can do the math and figure it out.
So do you think the students who are staying back in Bangladesh, do they lack a little bit of global competitiveness when they're coming to US later on for masters and PhD? I know you touched on this before a little bit, but if you can elaborate a little bit more.
Are you asking like whether they face more competition or?
Yeah, I mean, so if someone comes from Bangladesh as a bachelor student, so either if you are coming as an immigrant, you either have to have an equivalent seat and take like FE exams to try to get job in US. So, how do you see, I guess, the balance between these two? I guess if you're getting a bachelor's in US versus that.
Like again, I think it's kind of, I'm going to repeat a little bit of what I said before. Like when you have stayed here longer, you're more adapted to the culture, more adapted to the system, so things are a little bit easier. Another thing, because I applied to graduate schools myself, and I think when I talk to people who are applying from Bangladesh after they have done their undergrad, the process it might seem a little more intimidating to them than it seemed to me because I was already here. It was like, oh yeah, I can just go visit that campus if I needed to, as opposed to somebody coming from Bangladesh who's just coming to that campus and they don't know where it is. It could be in the middle of nowhere, right? And that could be a total like, oh, where have I landed from Dhaka City to like College Station, you know?
Right.
So stuff like that. So you have that advantage that, you know what you're getting into, or you know the place, or even in terms of jobs, because when I was in undergrad, there were often like people who came in from the industry who talked about the firms they worked at, the kind of jobs they did. So even when I was a student, I kind of had an idea of what I would be doing if I got a job as a geotechnical engineer, right? Or as a water resources engineer. So that exposure is not necessarily something you're gonna have if you come as an immigrant from Bangladesh. So I think that just add a little more to your journey, a little more steps. But I don't think it's like there's obviously like there's pros and cons on both ends. It's just because I have only seen one journey, so I can speak of like this one.
Do you think there is a social bias in Bangladesh where studying abroad is considered as a status symbol more than a career choice?
It could be actually. I think I have heard of that before. I have seen only rich kids go abroad, all sorts of statements like that. But even when the rich kid, I'm not saying rich kids don't go abroad. There are obviously the ultra rich in Bangladesh, but even when the rich kid comes here, they have to do the same job as somebody else. We still have to pump our own gas at the gas station, do everything by ourselves. So. Yeah, that notion is there. I don't know if it has changed any more than how it was 10 years ago. But 10 years ago, that notion was there that only rich kids get to, you have to be privileged enough to be able to do this. But I have seen people who maybe, they didn't necessarily come from a lot of money, but they figured it out because they were smart. They had great scores, they got great scholarships, and they went to really good schools. Um, so yeah, I think you are right that they don't necessarily look at it as a career choice, but which is how it should be really looked at. And it's not just a career choice, you're kind of making a choice for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
You're making the choice to come here, make a life here, which is very different from like you navigating a professional life here or a personal life here is very different from as it would be in Bangladesh. And it's not even that it's all like fun and games here, right? You lose a lot. You stay away from your family. You do everything on your own. You don't necessarily have a network here when you're looking for jobs. Nobody knows your name, right? It's just you. So it's not easy. It's not all fun and games. And some people think, oh, you live in the US, you're having a lot of fun. It's not like that. But yeah.
So what would be your take on people saying like studying abroad makes kids forget their roots?
Um, I don't think that that's necessarily true. Because I think if anything, I'm more nostalgic than ever. these days. Whether it's just, it's just like I haven't maybe traveled home for a while, or I'm just homesick, but it's in everything. It's like when I think about food, it's Bangladeshi food that I'm thinking about, or when it comes to like festive times, or because I'm Muslim, I celebrate Eid, right? So during Eid, that's one of the hardest days for me to stay here because nobody knows. Like in my office, nobody would even probably wish me Eid Mubarak. You know what I mean? Just little things like that. Not that I don't. I enjoy the festive season here, surely. But it doesn't take away from the fact that I grew up um, eating certain type of food, doing certain kind of activities, celebrating certain kind of things, or even friends. You had a type of friends, or like here I don't necessarily every day meet Bangladeshi people that if I say something about Bangladesh, they won't necessarily know what I'm talking about. And so I don't think you really forget your roots just by living somewhere. No, I don't think that happens.
So the parents in Bangladesh, do they push their kids too much in like engineering or subjects like medicine, ignoring the global trends? Like I know you said you changed your subject from electrical engineering to civil engineering, which is not something that someone can pursue back in Bangladesh, probably. What's your thought on that?
I think that's very true. Like parents do that a lot, and my parents were no different. I wanted to study literature. And when my dad said, literature is not gonna pay your bills, so you need to do something that's gonna make some money so you can pay your bills. So my parents were no different than that. I guess it's just the way things work in Bangladesh. Like you either have to be an engineer, or a doctor. But I do think that the mindset is changing now because I see a lot of people not doing science just because they don't want to study science, right?
Right.
Which is how it should be. Like science, why should everybody like it, right? Um, so yeah, that mindset is definitely there, and which I don't agree with at all. But even my parents were very supportive, were no different from that.
Cool. So do you think that having a bachelor's from US gave you a competitive edge in getting a master's or PhD school?
I don't know if so I was already working in the lab where I did my PhD, so the professor already knew me. And during my undergrad, I was actually on, there is something called a fast track masters,
Mhm.
where in your fourth year
Yeah.
and your third year, you take more specific electives. So I knew that I wanted to do geotech, so I was only taking geotech electives. So I didn't do a whole lot of advanced structures classes because, I thought that I don't want it, right? So because I was a fast track master's student, I was gonna get a master's anyhow, whether it was from the same university or elsewhere. When I was close to graduation and I thought that I could apply elsewhere as well, like why not, explore my options. So I ended up applying to a few different schools for master's, a couple for PhD. But for PhD, the funding is important. So the funding wasn't necessarily like working out. And at that point, I had thought that, oh, I'm just gonna go somewhere and get a master's. That's fine. But then the professor who I was working, whose lab I was working at, and he said, well, if you wanted, you could do a PhD here. And then I thought, I'm gonna go get a master's, and then, I don't know if I'll get
Mhm.
a PhD or not. And then it seemed more comfortable. I already knew what I had to do. The research project I had to work on was already there for me to start. And it would be like I'll graduate in the spring, I'll start in the summer. It was very like back to back. So it kind of all fell into place for me, like as easy as that sounds. But I don't think that it didn't give me much of a competitive edge in terms of, I don't know if my application looked any better than somebody who graduated from Buet. I think my application may have been just the same.
So, do you think your life would look completely different, like if you had stayed in Bangladesh and applied for a PhD from Bangladesh, like how would it be look like?
So I don't think that if I was in Bangladesh, I wouldn't apply for a PhD, because my idea growing up, at least, I saw that only people who are in academia or who want to be in academia get a PhD. Um, I never saw that anybody got an undergrad and went to get a PhD. It was when I started working in this lab and I saw all these young people who just did their undergrad or just did a master's and they came to the US and they were getting a PhD. And some of them didn't even want to be professors. And I was like, oh, you can do that. Like, you can do a PhD and not have to be a professor. Because I know even in my fourth year, when I was applying to universities, and they were like, my relatives who were asking me, so you're going to graduate, what are you going to do? And I'm like, oh, I'm applying to get a PhD. And they're like, oh, like, we didn't know you wanted to be a professor. And I'm like, well, you don't have to be a professor. You can just get a PhD just because you want to. So I think if I was in Bangladesh, I don't think that thought would have ever even occurred to me that you can get a PhD and not be in academia. So I may have not applied at all. But it was here that I got that exposure, or I got that idea that people who don't want to be in academia, who are not in academia, also enjoy doing research and they just do a PhD because they enjoyed that process.
So do you think that PhD actually give you a better shape for the industry?
To an extent, in the sense that the work that I did, or my PhD program was very aligned to the kind of work that I do now. Also, even during interviews, I think, like I told you, like nobody ever picked up on my bachelor's from here. It was always like, oh, you have a PhD. And if I was applying for an entry-level position, they would give me the second entry-level position, just because I had an advanced degree that most people don't have. Um, it didn't necessarily, I had a good lot of experience just because my PhD work was so aligned with the industry that I work in. I don't think that it's the case. It's generic for every industry. I know a lot of people who do something completely different for research, and then the industry does something completely different.
Yeah.
But my PhD specifically, I think it did prepare me in terms of even the program that I use very heavily is the same program that is used in the industry. So I have a better understanding of it as opposed to somebody who learned it on the job, because I used it for longer. So there was stuff like that. Also, it's just that, oh, people think that you have an advanced degree or like you went through the process of getting a PhD. So, you will be more patient with your work, or you have that capability to learn things quickly. I think that idea really helps.
Can you, I guess, tell us a little bit more about how the hiring process goes for like someone like you who having multiple degrees from US versus, I know you say isn't much people who like in the interview process who look into the degrees of a I guess undergrad degree if you have taken it from here or Bangladesh, but having multiple degrees from US, did that some kind of help you to fast track into a career that you are in right now?
I don't believe so, in the sense that I only applied to jobs after I finished my PhD. I was doing a full-time internship my last semester of PhD. That helped in the sense that because I was already working, I was very confident when I was doing my interviews. Because it's one thing being in university and being in preparing for an interview, and it's different when you're already doing a similar job and preparing for the same type of job. I think it gives you more confidence. You can talk easily. You're more prepared with answers because you're not necessarily memorizing answers, right? You're just speaking from what you're doing every day. So I think that really helped during my interviews that I was doing a full-time internship. So I highly encourage people who want to go into full-time industry job that if it works for you, if you get an opportunity to do an internship, even if it's really hard with like semester work, still do it. Like take that load and do that internship because that really gives you that confidence for your actual job search. I don't remember that in any of my interviews it necessarily helped that I already had a bachelor's from here or anything like that. But I do know that if you apply for some government jobs, or like licenses. You have to get your degree evaluated if you have a degree from a
Yeah.
foreign country and all that. So all that I didn't have to deal with. It was just easy because I was just, sending everything from here. It was just that little ease that I had, I think. Other than that, I don't think with job search it helped that much. It was that there were people who would come to our university. We had career fairs and all that stuff, but I didn't apply. I didn't get the job from a career fair, or I didn't make that connection. So that didn't really like work for me. But I know for a lot of people that does help. But I just didn't necessarily have that opportunity to make that connection because I was doing an internship somewhere else. So I didn't even get to attend the career fair in my last semester. So yeah.
So I know you mentioned you did a few internships, I guess. So did it help? Because like someone who's coming for a master's is only for 1.5 years here, and being a long period of time in US, did that help for you build that network to land that internship while you in your
Um,
college?
I think it does help because you know a lot more people. Like, so I was in the same department. So when I graduated with my PhD, I was in the department for 8 years. Um, Almost professors knew me. Professors are involved with professional organizations, or every professional organization has a student chapter, and they organize for people to come and speak to the students, right? So you build relationships there. So I think that is something that did help, that I was meeting more people knew my name, people knew who I was, and it wasn't just like, maybe I just met them once, but I had that one conversation with them and they knew that, oh, I was looking for a job. So that was definitely there. Or that I met people here because I worked in a research lab, they went on to get jobs, right? So I had a network there too. Like if I wanted, I could reach out to them and be like, hey, I'm looking for a job. So yeah, when you spend a longer time here, I think that gives you certain benefits, as opposed to someone who's doing a master's is barely spending 2 years. And then he has to study and do whatnot in the 2 years, right?
Absolutely.
So, like, do you think that Bangladeshi graduates like us, like who came here for masters or maybe coming here for PhDs, uh, lack of the soft skills that US universities focus on?
Um, I I think the soft skills are not necessarily that we come from Bangladesh or somebody comes from Bangladesh. It's a lot also like on the personality
Yeah.
of the person, right? You could like be in a school here. Like I will still have trouble making certain type of conversations. Like it doesn't matter how many years I live here, I won't be able to talk about sports with them. So there are certain things that's there. But certain things also like, if they make references to like something that happens in school. Sometimes I'm able to understand what they're talking about, but somebody who like maybe did a master's doesn't quite like easily understand what they're referring to. Those little moments are there, but I think soft skills. I don't necessarily think that the university helps you so much,
Yeah.
as much as it is a personality thing.
So, if a young Bangladeshi girl is planning to like come here for the bachelor's and says like my parents think sending me abroad for bachelor's is too risky, like as you were talking, like um, your parents were thinking about sending you to places where your relatives are there. So considering that, what would you tell her?
I don't necessarily want to say that there are no risks,
Mm-hmm.
but I think there are certain things that exist here that don't exist in Bangladesh. Like if I felt like somebody was following me on the street here, or on campus, I could call campus police at any time, and I know they would be there, or I had that in the back of my mind. So, I could be in the library or in my research lab until 10 p.m., walk back to my apartment. But I had that thing, okay, campus police is probably patrolling. If they're not, I have their number. If I feel something is off, I can always call them. And, I have that bit of trust that, they're going to be here. Um, I I didn't really go out a whole lot in Bangladesh when I was in school by myself, just because, I was under 18. But I don't necessarily think that Bangladesh is also very safe for girls, right? I could be saying something completely wrong, but um, it's not like the safety issue is not here. Like, as bad as that sounds, maybe, it is a little more unsafe for girls to do certain things at certain time of the day than it is for a boy. Even if it's just like, comfort level that, I don't feel comfortable going out by myself at this hour. But maybe you being a boy, you're gonna feel more comfortable doing it, so you'll feel safer. So I understand why they would feel scared or uncomfortable. But in Bangladesh, it doesn't necessarily give us a very safe environment either. But here, at least I personally felt like you had the comfort that you could call somebody from the forces and they'll be there. And especially if you're coming as a student, I know that campus security is really good for a fact. So that's something I think I can speak about that. Campus police or campus security level, they're really good. They'll make sure that I remember one time my headlights were off because I was driving and I didn't realize my headlights were off. And the cop just pulled me over to make sure I was okay. Um, so there are things like that. I've noticed many many moments of kindness from them. So yeah.
I know you mentioned you worked in a lab during your undergrad, right? So we all know there is a very much like all kinds of labs out here in US, and you can access those if you have a good relationship with your professors and all that, and get involved with voluntary works and all these things. So do you think like students who are capable of more back in Bangladesh, is it the Bangladeshi education system is holding them back, or they could have done better if they were here abroad earlier?
I don't know that whether or not they can work in a lab, because I think even in Bangladesh, in private universities or public universities, you can work in a lab, right? If you wanted to. I do think that opportunities can be pursued easier here. Um, just because I know competition is everywhere, but I just think it's a lot easier to get opportunities here or to pursue opportunities here. Maybe in Bangladesh, competition is a lot more. I'm not very sure about that, but I felt like here, if there a professor has an opening for an undergraduate student, it's not gonna be internally filled, right? That word will go out through email to everybody. So even if you don't get the position, at least they will speak to you. And you feel like, okay, at least I gave the interview and I didn't get the position, somebody else got it. But sometimes I think in Bangladesh it happens that you don't even get the chance to have that conversation and the position is already filled. So that I think is true, that I personally feel that here opportunities can be pursued more easily. I don't know if that's because of competition being less here or more transparency, or they just like, at least they give you a chance to speak first before they take somebody else.
Would you encourage people, more families, to consider doing undergrad in abroad, rather than saving their money or resources for getting a master's or PhD?
I think if you want to get a master's or a PhD here and your long-term plan is that you want to come here, I have the same mindset. I think that you can start as early, as possible. It really helps you adapt to the place easier. Um, just because I came here younger, I feel like maybe I really did adapt a little bit more than somebody who came like 5 years after I did. Because as we grow old, it's harder for us to like adapt to changes, right? So if your ultimate goal is, yeah, I want to go there, then why not start early? Because if let's say you come to a university here for your undergrad, you probably can go to a much better university for your master's.
Yeah.
Just because there are so many programs available or so many options available that you don't realize when you're in Bangladesh. You could be parts of specific scholarly programs to go to graduate school as well. So if you really set your heart to it, you can really go places. So if your long-term plan, I think, is to come here, then I think you should really think about investing on the front end, maybe send them here for an undergrad, and then maybe you don't have to pay for their master's.
Absolutely.
So, looking back to your journey, like what's one harsh truth about studying abroad that nobody tells you actually?
I don't think it was so much about like studying abroad. It was more about the life abroad while you're studying. And we think it's gonna like I don't even really remember what I thought it was gonna be like, but it was very different. In terms of starting from, like I said, the classes were taught differently, people spoke differently, even math was taught differently than the way I had learned it. So that little thing to adopt. And when you don't speak like they do or most people do, you also hesitate to speak up in class. So even little things like that, nobody prepares you for it. And then, up until the age of 17 or 18, you stay at home, there's food made for you, there's comfort of everything, of your family, which you don't have. So nobody prepares you for that either. Um, so I think it's more about, I think, just the life here, than I think education. Because I think education, although there is certain level of adaptation definitely needed, because unit system, all that stuff is there. But I liked the education system here a lot. I used to study in an English school, so I studied in the British curriculum. While I think that's really good and that gives you great content, but I think it's a lot. And I think here the content is not any less, but I think it's taught to you better, and you don't necessarily feel the pressure all the time. Sure, like you have a lot of homework, you've got a lot of exams, but things get done and you learn. And it doesn't feel like, my life is gonna change for this one exam. Like my whole life, my whole like career depends on an exam. No, it doesn't work like that.
I think here the schools actually focus more on the application side rather than teaching you the like just memorizing things. Even considering the it like the education system changing differences like unit systems and everything. Uh, I remember like when I sit for the FE exam, I had really a hard time with the unit conversions. Like I remember like every question I was solving, I was thinking about the unit conversions. Did I do it correctly or
Hmm.
missing something? Yeah. So uh, looking back, like what's the one thing you do differently if you were in 2015?
I think I would take more time to do my application. Yeah. I say that to everybody. Right now, my cousin is looking at schools, like graduate school, and I'm telling her that it doesn't matter if you're a semester late, if you're a year late, but just take your time. You don't have to rush through it. For whatever reason, I had that mindset that, oh, I have to go to school this fall. But sometimes I think if I took my time or if I planned better, I maybe would have gone to a different school. I might have done something differently. Maybe I would get better scholarships, that would help me go to a different school. So all that was there. So I think I say take your time, plan ahead, and whenever you decide, you don't have to go to school the very next semester. Take that time, do your applications, do your research about schools, about programs, and there's a lot more programs than just engineering or medical, or there's a lot beyond science that you can pursue. So I would say, like, I would take my time.
So today's conversation shows the studying abroad for a bachelor's is not just about education, it's about courage, adaptability, and breaking out the traditional mindset. A huge thank to our guest, Dolapu. Um, for sharing her inspiring and unfiltered journey. We'll come back next week with a new guest and hear some more real talk. Any last words, Tolapu?
No, thank you guys for having me here. It was great talking about my 10 years old journey. There's a lot that I was thinking about, and it was great. Just I'm feeling a little bit nostalgic right now, thinking about my early struggle days on campus. But yeah, thank you guys are doing a great job. If you have any questions that you want me to answer or you need specific answers to, feel free to let me know. I'll try my best to remember from all my old days. But yeah, thank you for having me.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you so much for your time, Apu.